Alrighty. Credits at last. As I mentioned before, I was not expecting to beat this game today. I thought I at least had another 10 hours, but because the projection for this is like 50 or 60 plus hours, I thought maybe next week, next Monday. Today is Monday right now, so this is a little crazy that I beat this quickly. Was not expecting that. I did write down some thoughts for this game. Maybe not as many as I would have liked, but mostly because I was not expecting to beat this game today. And I had more time. And Lurking Tonberry said that seems to be the general feeling amongst some of the fans in regards to Balthier being the main character. And I like that idea a lot just because it doesn't require too much of a change. It just requires the beginning of the game to change a little bit. And that doesn't seem like a too insane of a thing to do. Because Balthier basically sticks around with the party for the entire game except for one short departure. But yeah, Final Fantasy XII Conquered. My overall thoughts on the game. I had a pretty good time with this game. I don't think it does all too much in like a negative aspect. There are some serious frustrations that occur with this, but it's it's a fun game. I feel like the music is too loud, but we're stuck here. So yeah, I would say overall, I enjoyed playing this game again, despite some of the pain points. Let's see. Story, was it satisfying? Honestly, I'm gonna say no. One of the problems that I have with the story of this game is I think they spend too much time focusing on things that are not really like central to the war. Um, Getting Ash her ability to claim her rightful place on the throne, and dealing with the lighthouse, and like there's the war aspects, which is like dealing with the resistance and the empire and Larsa and finding out the Nethicite and things like that. And then there's everything else. And I feel like everything else is a much bigger portion. And it makes the conclusion and even just the general engagements of learning about the war and whatnot not as interesting. I think it would have been a little bit more interesting if we were actually fighting uh, members of the war, like the judges and things like that. Speaking of that, a lot of I thought we were gonna fight way more judges. Maybe they're side bosses or something like that. But I really thought we were gonna fight way more judges than this. Seeing as they are the primary antagonist slash like general dudes that we would have to fight. So I'm a little disappointed that we were introduced to so many judges and we only get to fight two. We fought Gabranth, and I think we fought one before that. But yeah, I guess I'm a little disappointed in that. I wish, um, since the focus on this game is about the war and stopping the war, I wish we were involved in the war more. I wish it was more of a focal point, and less like the backdrop that we eventually engage in. through various aspects. Could have been more enjoyable for me. Did it feel complete? I will say it felt complete. I don't think there's any lingering things left to chance here. Vane killed the whole council, so Larsa can rule on his own and whatnot. How was the pacing? I think what I mentioned a little bit earlier about like having a portion of the story be about the war and the portion about everything else basically. I think that probably gets lumped into the pacing for me. Um I do feel like I was always moving forward, and so that was nice, but I there's just those moments where it felt, I guess, a little bit slow. Going to get the Nethicite from King Wraithwall's tomb and that giant lighthouse tower that we were in to for the Suncrist. You know what? On top of, I didn't even mention this at all. I mean, I guess that goes into my thoughts in the story, which I'll transition to right now. The Acuria were such an integral part of the story, and they played such a minor role in it. And that's also really, really disappointing. Uh like we get one scene with the Acuria. We get a voice line afterwards that I guess alludes to the Acuria are responsible for uh Rassler's ghost or whatever. And then we have Vana, who basically just is an overgrown bodyguard. And I guess eventually sacrifices itself to empower Vane. But against JRPG fashion, I felt like we were introduced to gods and then we did not, like topple the gods, or we did not even interact with the gods enough to even be motivated to do what they want. On top of that, the dungeon to go meet the Curia was freaking insane. Okay, again, like the war stuff, and then there's like the Nethicite plot line, and then there's the war. And sometimes they converge, but it's not for very long, and it's in like it. Yeah, I wish there was more involved. Anything else about the story that I want to go through? I don't think so. Um, for the characters, I'm gonna stick with Balthier is the best character in this game. In fact, I thought he had way more voice lines and way more involvement in the story. You know what? I will actually say that all the characters in this game don't actually get that much spotlight or limelight, which is kind of strange. Um, there's not a lot of moments where we're just kind of like sitting together as a party and trying to figure out what we want to do or where we're going to go, or you know talking about things. I think for the most part, anytime that happens is when we're in the presence of another character that is utilized as a kind of platform to go to the next thing. There was the Marquis. I forget his name. The leader of the resistance guy. We met him. We had this like long conversation about what we're gonna do. There was Redis. We had a long conversation uh about those. Uh I don't know. Like maybe I'm just not remembering things as well. I mean, beating this, on day 12 was, just Wasn't expecting any of that. But yeah, I think Vaughn and Pinello. Vaughn's actually not that bad of a character, as crazy as it is coming from me. Um, it's just that Vaughn doesn't really get a chance to explain himself or to become his own character, to grow. As a matter of fact, I would even extend that to all the characters. I think Balthier really does get like the only character arc that I can think of. Vaughn Vaughn just chills, like he's just around to be around, and it's not like he grows or anything like that as a person. Pinello, does Pinello get more than like 15 voice lines in this game? I don't know. But Pinello stays stagnant. Uh, Balthier actually starts off as a thief, basically Han Solo, and he he's there to get paid, and he ends up being, the savior to end the day, and not feel like a pirate thief anymore. He actually has a character arc. Ash, I don't think changes all too much. I think she stays relatively the same. Fran doesn't really go anywhere. Balthier is relatively the same. Am I missing anybody? I think that's everybody. Yeah. Yeah, so that's kind of strange. It, like, the more you think about it, the more there's just more justifications for Balthier being the main character. Missed opportunity. Gameplay mechanics in design. What gameplay elements stand out? The Gambit system is neat overall. I think I think as a whole, I enjoyed the Gambit system more than I thought I would. And when I first played this game, however many years ago it was, somewhere around 2006 or something, uh, I was very enthralled by this system because it's so cool that you could create a bunch of like checks of, you need to do this in this order, and that's how you're going to do things. And and it's such a new and unique and cool system that I had never seen before in a video game. And fast forward to today, I still think it's a cool, unique, and system that you don't see anywhere, type of thing. Like, it's very, very cool. It's still a fresh idea. Um, that said, it does have some issues associated with it, um, that I didn't particularly like, such as, I wish gambits were acquired a little bit differently. Maybe they're level gated or unlocked on the license board or something similar to that, because trying to get them from random drops and chests or items to be purchased at specific intervals of the game feels limiting. Um, Obviously, by the end of the game, I felt like I had enough Gambit slots and Gambit thingamabobbers to do a couple of things. Mostly, it was the same strategy. It's just it opened up the extent of my strategy, or uh, like the breakpoints of my strategy, to be, a little bit less flimsy, such as like when I got the ability to use charge at self MP percentage. That made it so I could survive in fights a lot longer. If you remember back to the fights that I was doing before I got that, it was very rough. If you remember the fights that I was doing before I even got charge, it was extremely rough. So it kind of made it so that I didn't just die if I was at 0 MP. It made it so that I could now survive just a little bit longer. And that progression of gambits was nice, but to rely on drops and things like that, or just them unlocking in stores randomly at a variety of stores they have to go to. I'm not really a fan of that system when gambits are effectively the most important thing in this game, uh, to many degrees. Probably not the most important thing. The automation is the most exciting aspect to me, but the combat speed doesn't do the Gambit system justice, in my opinion. Something that I assume was addressed in the Zodiac Age version. So funnily enough about this, um, the combat speed definitely does feel slow, but something that I did not write down is that the combat is still incredibly hectic, or at least it was for me, for a variety of normal scenarios and for a ton of bosses, the vast majority of bosses. Um, I was in the menus selecting things and doing stuff basically all the time. And to do that without the pause feature of the combat, fights would have been quite a bit of a struggle, especially since, I use that kind of like pause time to assess the situation and trying to figure out, okay, maybe I should do something else. What's other people doing? And to take all that in real time would be pretty tough. Uh, let's see. If I want someone to be a dedicated spellcaster, I don't feel like that build is very open to me unless I do it manually. So that build actually opened up to me at the end of the game, towards the end of the game. I would say the end of the game. Basically, before I go to the lighthouse, maybe a little bit further than that, but basically then. Um, and yeah, it's strange to me. It's like how do you build a spellcaster in this game? What route do you take them? How do you make it so that the gambits are as effective for a spellcaster casting offensive magic than it is for someone just doing auto attacks? And even at the end of it all, I'm not even sure with all the little gambit pieces that I got that it still works. Look how many um uh look how many slots I needed just to cast spells. Like 6 of them for the regular elements, and then 2 more for holy and dark, and then I needed 1 to basically serve as an auto attack of sorts so that the person always had something to do. And then that leaves so little room to actually focus on all the other things like casting haste on yourself or protect or shell or curing people or raising them when they're going to die. So I I don't think spellcasters get as much flexibility as they probably should. There needed to be a gambit of, like ally has debuff, cast this, instead of listing every debuff by itself. Like that's so annoying. And then you have to go, like, if you want to change something, there's no there's no like presets that you could use. It would be kind of cool if you had, let's say, 5 presets of gambits for each character. And instead of going into the main menu and going to your gambit thing and changing which gambit you want to change, you want to turn it off or something like that, maybe you have that ability, but you also have like these preset pages. So like page 1 will be my normal, I'm just doing what I'm doing. Page two will be like my boss one, where maybe I'm doing very specific things. Page three is maybe focus on healing. Page five, just go all out, cast berserk on everybody and just kill everything. Um, something like that. And then being able to switch between those pages in the normal combat menu. Like maybe you're at Gambit, and instead of, pressing Gambit to turn off Gambits, maybe you can press left or right to switch to page one, two, three, four, five, etc. Um, that would change things immensely. And I feel it would speed up the combat and the strategy elements and things like that a little bit better. I mean, you could still go into the menu and still swap out things as you need to, but there would be more flexibility. And I think the Gambit system, as crazy as this sounds, is an insanely flexible system that is also very inflexible based off of um, the other aspects that it interacts with, such as how to get gambits and how to utilize those gambits. Yeah, the system's answer to spellcasters to be a spellblade. So you're just gonna melee all the time, anyways. Yeah, that's kind of the thing that I was seeing. Um, also, while I'm here, this is not really related to gambits, but I need to say this before I forget. Katanas are atrocious. Um, I what in the world? I I would really love to know more about the balance of the weapons, because one-handed weapons and a shield is it's it's at least double as strong. It's a poor way to say it, but it's it's twice as strong as like any of the two-handed weapons that I've tried. And and that's not even taking into account the well, I guess I didn't try spears. I should have tried spears. That's not even taking into account the defensive aspects of just having a shield. I or maybe it's just that katanas are just atrocious. Maybe katanas just suck, and perhaps you're supposed to maybe use spears. Maybe spears just do a ton of damage because your strength and you're tanky and stuff like that. But um, I really question why two-handed weapons are so weak. At least the ones that I've used. I tried using poles very, very briefly. I did not give it its due, but it was incredibly weak. I tried using um, guns at the beginning. The problem with guns is like, yeah, you ignore defense, but your attack power is just significantly lower than everything else in the game. And so it's like, oh, I'm not going to use guns. Bows seemed okay. I don't remember much about the bows other than, Fran was doing some damage for a while there. Didn't try out bombs. There was more experimentation to be had for sure. This is an odd pattern you've noticed in Matsuno games that have a weapon system. Ah, I see. That's disappointing. Let's see. Moving on. The license board is cool, but mostly only in a perspective of if you already know what you're doing. A large chunk of systems are tied to it, from weapons, armor, accessories, gambit slots, spells, stat improvements, techniques, and special buffs. If you don't know what you want, you could be going in directions that are not helpful because can be very scattered. Sometimes you have to invest in spaces you don't really want or need. So By the end of the game, I I felt like I had enough license points to do whatever it is that I wanted to do. But I don't think that necessarily negates that early feeling of, okay, I have 300 license points. I can unlock 10 slots. Where do I go? What do I want? Is this even good, or is this just a waste of points? It's so overwhelming to look at that license board and then look at the things that you unlock and not even know what impact those things will have, because they just don't tell you anything, which I'll get to in a little bit. I feel the entire board should be revealed, and you should just be able to choose where you want to go. Hiding them makes choosing the wrong path too easy. Or, at the very least, if that part of the board is revealed on another character, then it's revealed for all characters. So I like the idea of the board being fully revealed because sure, it gives you that path of exile effect of like, holy crap, I have this gigantic board and I have to look at everything to figure out where I'm going. And I can see from perhaps a game designer's perspective of, instead of front loading that on a player, you want to unlock it piece by piece. But I think some of the fun in RPGs is planning things and planning where you want to go and how you want to get there is probably one of the stronger aspects of RPGs. Talent trees and the like from, MMOs or any other games that utilize talent trees. Um, Seeing something at the bottom of the tree and be like, okay, that's what I want. How do I get there? That's super fun. I guess the big problem is, talent trees are so much smaller than the license board, but you know, you invest the opening 2 hours or what have you to learning where you want to go for the license board with each character, and then you don't have to do it. And something that I don't even have written down here is that you could preset paths. Um, Man, what game is it? There's a game out there. Is it Final Fantasy X? Is it 13? Is it just not a Final Fantasy game? There's a game out there where you can um like choose your path that you want to go down, and as you level up to get the points, it'll automatically progress you in that path. And I think they could have done something like that with the license board if it were fully revealed, because then you could learn the license board. You spend the 2 hours to learn the license board, and then you set the path for every character to go, and then you're basically done. You can make some adjustments here and there as you're going along, as weapons become available and whatnot. But it's an initial investment, and you don't have to necessarily be concerned about that investment later on. For me, when I was playing this game, I felt like I had to figure out the route I was going every single time I went into the license board. And that was just extremely time consuming. And it it really wasn't all that fun because I knew I had to put points into things that I didn't want to put points into. Um and to that end, if revealing the entire license board was too much and it was too overwhelming, making it so that if Vaughn has, let's say, a grid of 5 licensed stuff somewhere, and Fran has a grid of 5 licensed things somewhere else, they would both be revealed for all the other characters. Uh, then it's not so overwhelming because you know where each character has their own little stuff, and it kind of prevents you from doing the swapping back and forth to see, like, okay, is this what I want? No, that's not that one. I gotta go around that, or something like that. I think that would have been a very clever way to drastically lessen the issues surrounding the license board without getting rid of the issues entirely. You don't see why it would be necessary to hide what you can unlock. If it was to not overwhelm a player, at least a visual segmenting into categories would have been good. Like, you don't know what you'll get, but this is the armor route. So they do have that in the license board. It's not immediately evident when you're first starting out, but as you're going through the game more, you start seeing that, like, okay, this section right here is augments. This section over here is techniques. This section over here is accessories. This is spells, and then this is this armor type, and this is these weapon types and things like that. But it's not it's not it's not like perfectly sectioned off in the sense of the spells. It's all the spells, and so inevitably you are going to have to get a spell that you don't necessarily care for or want or need in order to get to another spell. And it's like that for everything. um Earlier, when I was looking for katanas and ended up going into like ninja swords and stuff, like, or looking for guns, you have to go get like bombs and poles before you can get gun 3. And it's just like, why would you do that? um it would have been less interesting, but it would have been a a better route is if they did just have gun 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, just like a straight line, and they just had those straight lines next to each other. It certainly would have been less interesting, but sometimes you gotta do less interesting things, not do the annoying things. Let's see. The descriptions can be extremely unhelpful. Phoenix Down restores more HP. Potions restore more HP. The value that is restored is the most important information that needs to be shown. Holy cow. It's so annoying to look at stuff like that and be like, okay, is this one gave me, let's just say, plus 25 to my regular potions. Okay. Is this next one going to give me plus 25 to my regular potions? Or is it going to give me more than that? Or is it a multiplicative percentage? Or is it not a multiplicative percentage? There's so much information that needs to be there for potions restore more HP to see if it's actually worth taking. Potions restore 25% more HP. Potions restore 50 more HP. Give me something that actually helps me make a informed decision. You know, being required to save scum, or save, choose what you want, and then test it out. And then if you don't like it, redo the whole thing. That should never be a requirement. And some things like those license spots, they feel like you need to make that investment, that save scum investment, in order to figure out if it's worth. And stuff like that can be very disappointing. The next thing, this one's a very big one for me. The cost to power ratio feels very off. I need to fight 30 enemies to get plus 50 HP, or fight 30 fights to gain access to White Magic 3, which in turn costs another 3,000 plus money to then be able to cast. And, on top of that, that White Magic 3 gives me access to spells that cost like 22 or 48 MP or something like that. It's kind of crazy to think about how much investment you have to put in to get that one thing. And everything in this game is so unbelievably expensive. Putting it into perspective that you have to fight 30 enemies to unlock a 30-point license grid is actually kind of insane. Especially considering all the little license spots that are there. It's really insane. Also taking into account that you don't get access to double license points until, what is it, 50, 60, 70% into the game? I'm not 100% sure when I got that. It was it was before that Mount Olmasace place, I think, was attacked. I think it was right before then, or yeah. So, whenever that is in the long grand scheme of things for the game, something like that should be available at the very beginning, the absolutely very beginning, if this is the type of investment that you're going to expect. Granted, my license boards, they were looking pretty good by the end of the game, but I did utilize that double license point up until the point where I felt like I was good. Otherwise, I'd still be probably lacking quite a bit. But yeah, 30 license points to get 50 HP, or 155 license points to get 500 HP. There's just a huge disparity of cost. Whether it's magic to MP being used to cast that magic, or cost of a weapon to the power of the weapon that it's giving you. And you know what? Something that I don't have here, which also annoys me, item descriptions are just as unhelpful as license board uh, uh, descriptions. It doesn't tell you that armor gives you plus strength, or armor gives you additional magic while you are purchasing that particular item. And I feel like that's probably one of the most important things that you need to be telling me, is if it gives me more than defense or magic resist, then that would be a pretty big thing to inform my decision. But it doesn't tell you anything like that. For some reason, I had an ice brand. That thing was doing 2,000 damage to a large amount of enemies in the game that weren't even vulnerable to ice. They could have been weak to it, but how was I supposed to know? Libra doesn't tell you a dang thing other than their HP. Libra is another thing, actually. Libra just doesn't tell you very much. For having to spend what you need to spend to utilize it, could be better. Anyways, money acquisition is very underwhelming. Prices for items are insane. Pots and chests give such low amounts in proportion to the cost of the inventory in stores. Hunts, which are very challenging, fights that felt like they would boast high rewards, provide low money rewards. In a scenario where equipment costs 3,000 or more money, I was getting 500 money from a hunt I barely beat. I probably spent more money in high potions and Phoenix Downs than what I gained. Yeah, I I don't know if I don't think I talk about the chaining system. Uh I looked at the chaining system in in this game, and it the explanation is lacking. The I don't think it's a reasonable thing to say that based off of the information that the game gives you, you're like, "Oh, let me just get my chain up to 50 and I'll be set for life," you know? I don't think it necessarily works like that. Um, and I didn't really feel like chaining was all that encouraged. The tutorial could have been a tutorial, and it's possible. Maybe I missed it, but I'm pretty sure it was just a few lines of dialogue. Um, but anyways, yeah, getting money in this game, not very fun. For combat is pretty slow, which doesn't necessarily bother me too much. There are times where it's very chaotic, and that slow speed is helpful. I don't know if I agree with this anymore. Um, I I think in the beginning, combat is very, very, very slow. But at the end of the game, combat was slow in moments, but was incredibly chaotic in so many other moments. And I mean so many other moments. Especially the last, 10 to 25% of a boss's HP, where, I'm basically manually taking over one to two characters so that I can try to figure things out and get back up. There's been a couple of times, maybe even more than a couple of times, where I've been fighting bosses and I'm at one character and it is it's all looking lost. And then somehow the right sequence of events happens and I get the second character up, I get the third character up, everybody gets up to full HP and we're back in it. And those moments are exhilarating, if not terrifying in of themselves as well. The wait time leading up to an action and after an action has been performed is a big issue for me. It takes a long time for actions to be executed, and spells like Cure have a huge wait time after they've been cast, where you just sit there and do nothing. There's too much do nothing in combat, basically. I would still agree with this. And I think the issue is actually exacerbated the further you get into the game. When you get access to, or when the enemies get access to spells like Flare. Flare takes. I'm going to exaggerate here. Flare takes 15 seconds to to start the cast and uh, end the animation, and once that end, you now start the next animation. During that 15 seconds, nothing happens. You're just like everybody is just sitting there, except there's one issue. The the enemies can still like squeeze in an attack in there. So if if I have three Kirajas lined up and a flare was just cast, somebody goes down to 200 HP, the the enemy that casts flare can potentially get an attack off, like an auto attack, and kill that 200 HP person before anybody else gets to cast a spell. And that kind of stuff is so frustrating. It is so unbelievably frustrating. I don't know why it's like that because there's no other like none of the other spells work like that. Curaja, you don't have to wait for somebody to cast Curaja before the next person has to cast a Curaja. Um, I don't think Thundaga is working like that either. So it's just like certain spells. I don't want to say lag the game, but like they pause everything that's happening so that that spell can happen, and just takes too long. I I Flare is probably the highest damaging spell in the game, at least that I had access to. But because of that wait period, it just wasn't worth casting. I could cast two, maybe three Thundagas in that entire section of time and do more damage than that one flare cast because of that issue. So that was a lot. It was a lot. Let's see. They could just color the tiles differently. That would have been an interesting idea as well. I would have been open to that. Are they susceptible to ice? I don't know. I have no idea. And apparently Zodiac Age improves a lot of this. All the like the cost money acquisition stuff. Man. I just struggled my way through the OG version. It doesn't always work out like this though. Sometimes the remasters are not the best versions to play. So I don't necessarily regret playing the original because, I saved myself, $30, $40 or whatever. But uh, uh, rough times is rough times. You had an idea for games, something like the Gambit system, before you've seen it. A hybrid between pre planning, automated fight, and the ability to intervene if you want to change something. I think the Gambit system is a very cool system. Um, the only there are two issues with the Gambit system that are very big issues. The first is how every other system intertwines with the Gambit system, and the other one is automated combat is inherently very uninteresting. And so you have to figure out a way to navigate those. If if you have a game that plays itself, um, where's the like the push and pull for it? And so I think that Final Fantasy 12 does some things that make it interesting, make it a little bit dynamic, make it a little bit frustrating. But like frustration is not necessarily negativity. It's just like maybe I didn't cast that spell, maybe I didn't interrupt that at the right moment. And I screwed up or something like that, or the enemy changes their attack. Um, uh, the Gambit system is cool, and I do want to see it in other games. I do want to see other takes on it. But it's been this is like 17 years, and I have not heard of any other games using a Gambit system. So life is hard. For cardinal sins, hmm. I didn't do these beforehand, but I don't think removing a key party member without sufficient replacement is a thing. But I will add here that, uh, not to cardinal sins, but add to the general overall thoughts. Um, the guests in this game, I wish I could control them to some degree. Um, Maybe look at their gambits, maybe rearrange their gambits, um, something like that. Uh, Characters like Larsa were either very helpful or not very helpful in moments. Characters like Redis was like, yeah, I'm going to attack this guy that's immune for the entire fight while you go handle everything else. You know, this is not very helpful. And there are some instances where guest characters actually just take resources from the rest of the party, and it that might not necessarily be beneficial. Like having an extra 2000 HP may not be worth the 3 Curaja casts that I need to cast on them to keep them alive for them to just do whatever they want. But there were obviously moments in the game that were balanced around that. So it is what it is. Let's see. Forcing the player to use certain party members. Interestingly enough, that never happened. Actually, very proud of this game. Let's see. Backup party earns less experience. We need to add that one. That one is definitely in this one. Backup party earns 0 experience. The suckers. Let me see. It doesn't have a silent protagonist though, so there you go. Alrighty, so yeah, that's the only cardinal sin that I can see here. Yeah. That was your thinking? Speed up fights by automating it, but not making the game that plays itself. Okay. It's an issue as most people aren't into sitting back and giving commands. They prefer to be active, action-based. At some point, it just becomes battle simulator. Yeah, I think the negative aspects of a gambit system are very, very numerous. And the positive aspects of a gambit system are equally as numerous, but only to a smaller subset of people. People that want to optimize a fight so that it rolls as smoothly as possible. But in the same way for Dungeons and Dragons, you know, the people that want to optimize their characters to be as powerful as they can be with every single point that they can allocate is a different subset of people than the people that just want to experience a really cool story and create a character that's revolving around that story, or characters that want to dabble into optimization, but dabble into making their character, you know, fully encased in the story as well. So, you know, like it's about building a game for the right audience, I guess. And the interesting thing about Final Fantasy is that it has a very specific audience, and to create a gambit system for Final Fantasy games, that definitely alienates a lot of people, which I think history has shown that, you know, there's not a lot of people out there that speak highly of Final Fantasy 12, especially in comparison to Final Fantasy games that precede it. And you can see that games starting at Final Fantasy 12 and going forward have been viewed much less favorably for games that were preceding Final Fantasy 12. And I think a large portion of that is the combat systems in every single Final Fantasy game from 12 onward were different than the combat systems before. People like traditional turn-based combat. And we haven't seen a traditional turn-based combat Final Fantasy game in quite some time. You know, food for thought, I guess. Miscellaneous sound and music. Music was Final Fantasy music. As I grow older, I'm not necessarily enthralled too much to orchestra music, but Final Fantasy music always just hits that special niche for me, even though it's not a niche. But like, it's Final Fantasy music just generally seems good no matter what Final Fantasy game it is. And I don't know, is this a Nobuo Uematsu game? Does it say on the box? It does not say. Um, but I don't know. Uh, Final Fantasy music, it slaps. It always does. For voice acting, I actually like the voice acting. As I mentioned earlier, um, I've played some games that don't have as good voice acting, and at least from my perspective, when you experience things that are not as good, it helps you appreciate the things that are better than that. And you know, that's that's what I got to say there. For graphics, I emulated the game, so it's probably gonna look a little bit better than what it actually would on the PlayStation 2. But I thought the game looked good. I think I only encountered maybe like two issues, and one of them was in that Famfrit fight with Sid. Replay value. Does the game offer additional story content in a second playthrough to warrant playing the game again? Probably not. I don't even... Oh, controller's turned off. Probably not. All right. Answer that question is no. Yeah, answer that question is no. Is the game worth recommending? This one's the interesting one. How do you recommend, like, who do you recommend Final Fantasy XII to? As I mentioned before, like the Gambit system is going to appeal to a very specific subset of players. And you can't just say, oh, you liked Final Fantasy 1 through 10, you'll love 12. I don't necessarily see that. And so, yeah, I would certainly struggle with finding, like, what are the key factors of this game that you can extract and then compare them to other games. There's no other games that I've played or even heard of that have a Gambit system where you can basically control the minute details of how a combat functions. But it's not like a tactics game, It's not like a real-time strategy game. So I wouldn't recommend it to those types of players. Yeah. And you know what? It does feel MMO-y, like it does share some similarities with that, but like I still don't know if I would recommend this to an MMO player. I don't think the Gambit system is like an MMO thing. I don't know. It's really strange. Is the game worth recommending? I will say yes. Who you recommend it to, I have no idea. I don't know. I don't know anybody off the top of my head where I'll be like, you will find this combat system enjoyable, and in turn will enjoy the story. So, who knows? Let's see. If the developer is watching, I I had a good time. I enjoyed myself. Would I want a sequel? If if Balthier was the star, sure. Let me go on an adventure with Balthier. Let's bring the homie back. Let's do that. All right. Well, that is going to be the end of my thoughts. Just to reiterate my overall thoughts, I enjoyed playing this game. I beat it much sooner than I was expecting to, and I struggled a lot, but I overcame those challenges, and I only really grinded once, maybe 2 times tops. So I think that feels pretty good. Pretty good because I think Final Fantasy games in general, at least like past Final Fantasy games, they've always had this air of you're gonna need to grind, and it feels nice to not have to do that. But yeah, ending my thoughts here.